The microphone squealed, and 500 people went dead silent. I'm Nathan Reynolds, 57 years old, and I was about to get fired in the most public way possible. But here's the thing. Nobody knew yet. I was also about to own them all. Let me back up a bit. I'd been at Apex Defense Systems for 23 years. Started there right after my Navy discharge in 2001 when the company was maybe 50 people crammed into a converted warehouse in San Jose. Now we're talking about a major defense contractor with Pentagon clearance and contracts worth $2.3 billion. And yeah, I built the system that runs the whole thing. The trouble started about 8 months ago when Richard Bradford brought his daughter Chelsea back from Stanford. Fresh MBA, 29 years old, and all the confidence that comes with never having failed at anything in your life. Richard made her VP of Operations, which was like handing the keys to a Formula One car to someone who'd only driven bumper cars. I should have seen it coming. Chelsea had that look, the one you see on people who think a fancy degree makes up for actual experience. She'd walk through the engineering department in her designer suits, throwing around buzzwords like digital transformation and disruptive innovation. The guys would nod politely, then go back to doing the real work. See, here's what people don't understand about military contractors. You don't just slap together some code and call it a day. This stuff protects national security. Every line of code gets reviewed, tested, verified by people with clearances higher than most senators. It takes years to get Pentagon approval for anything. And my system? It had been running flawlessly for 15 years. I remember the day I first started building it. September 2009, right after the financial crisis hit. Apex was struggling, contracts were getting cut, and we needed something to set us apart. Richard pulled me aside and said, "Nathan, we need a system that can handle everything. Contracts, payments, security clearances, the works. Can you build it?" Most people would have said it was impossible. Too complex, too many moving parts, too many security requirements. But I'd spent 12 years in the Navy working on combat systems. I knew how to build things that couldn't fail, so I did. Nights, weekends, holidays. I lived in that server room for 2 years. My wife Sarah was still alive then, fighting her first round with cancer. She'd bring me coffee at midnight and shake her head. "You care more about that computer than you do about me," she'd joke. But she knew better. I was building something that would keep us secure for decades. The system I created wasn't just software, it was architecture. Every transaction, every contract, every security protocol flowed through algorithms that I'd written line by line. And because I'd been in military intelligence, I knew how to build in protections that went beyond standard cybersecurity. Biometric locks, voice recognition, behavioral analysis. The system didn't just check passwords, it learned patterns. How fast someone typed, the rhythm of their commands, even the sequence they used to access different modules. It was designed to recognize me specifically because in high-security environments, you need that level of authentication. That was 15 years ago. Since then, Apex had grown from a struggling mid-sized contractor to one of the Pentagon's most trusted partners. We handled everything from logistics software for overseas bases to communication systems for classified operations, and it all ran on my system. But Chelsea Bradford didn't care about any of that. She had her own vision. The real problem started 3 months ago when she demanded administrative access to my core systems. She walked into my office like she owned the place, which technically her family did, and laid down the law. "Nathan," she said, not even bothering to sit down. "I need full admin access to the core infrastructure. Daddy wants me to understand how everything works so I can modernize it." I looked up from my screen where I'd been debugging a communication protocol for a base in Germany. "That's not how it works, Chelsea. Security clearance requires extensive vetting by the Pentagon. Even then, administrative access is limited to essential personnel only." Her face went red. You could see the entitlement radiating off her like heat. "I'm the VP of Operations, and I'm the senior systems engineer with top secret clearance and 23 years of experience. The Pentagon doesn't care about your title. They care about security protocols." That's when she really started hating me. Not because I was wrong, I wasn't, but because I represented everything she couldn't control. Her MBA might have taught her management theory, but it didn't teach her how to earn respect from people who'd been doing this work since before she could drive. She started making my life difficult after that, questioning my decisions in meetings, suggesting we needed fresh perspectives on system architecture, dropping hints that maybe it was time to transition institutional knowledge to the next generation. The writing was on the wall, but I figured I had job security. After all, who else could maintain a system this complex? Who else had the clearances, the experience, the institutional knowledge? I was about to find out just how wrong I was. The all-hands meeting was supposed to be about Chelsea's Digital Revolution 2.0 initiative. 500 employees packed into the main auditorium, everyone from junior engineers to department heads. I sat in the back, figuring I'd hear another presentation about synergy and innovation. Instead, I was about to become the main event. Chelsea stood at the podium like she was announcing the cure for cancer. Behind her, a massive screen displayed her Digital Revolution 2.0 presentation, all flashy graphics and corporate buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing. This company, she declared, her voice echoing through the auditorium, has been held back by legacy thinking and outdated systems. Today we're moving boldly into the future. I could see where this was heading. The few glances in my direction from colleagues told me they could too. Jerry Martinez from Network Security caught my eye and shook his head slightly. He'd been warning me for weeks that Chelsea was gunning for me. For too long, Chelsea continued, clicking to her next slide, we've relied on dinosaur-era infrastructure built by people who refuse to embrace innovation. Today, that changes. Dinosaur-era infrastructure. That's what she called the system that processed millions in transactions daily without a single security breach. The system that had earned Apex its reputation as the Pentagon's most reliable contractor. Effective immediately, her voice rose dramatically. Nathan Reynolds is terminated from Apex Defense Systems. The words hit like a physical blow. I felt 500 pairs of eyes turn toward me. The auditorium went dead silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. I stood up slowly, keeping my face neutral. Old Navy training, never let them see you rattled. But inside, the humiliation burned like acid. 23 years of loyalty, of nights spent troubleshooting critical systems while my family slept, of missing holidays and birthdays to keep this company running, and this is how it ended. Security will escort Mr. Reynolds from the building, Chelsea announced, like I was some kind of criminal. 2 guards appeared at my row, looking uncomfortable. I knew these guys, Mike and Tony from the front desk. They'd seen me work through countless crises, knew what I meant to this place. Sorry, Nathan, Mike whispered as we started walking. This is bullshit. I nodded but didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Chelsea had made her move, and now we'd all see how it played out. But as I walked down that aisle, something felt different. The system I'd built wasn't just lines of code running on servers. It was part of me. Every algorithm carried my fingerprints, every security protocol reflected my thinking, and right now, it was realizing its creator was being forcibly removed. That's when it started. A sharp beep echoed through the auditorium. Someone in the front row gasped. All heads turned toward the wall of monitors displaying our live system status. One transaction froze mid-process, then another, then 10 more. What's happening? Chelsea snapped at the nearest technician, her confidence already starting to crack. The guy's face went white as he stared at his screen. Ma'am, we're getting error messages across multiple systems. Red warnings began cascading across every monitor in the room. Authorization denied. Process halted. Transaction failed. The beautiful green displays I'd spent years perfecting turned into a sea of angry red alerts. Chelsea waved her hand dismissively, but I could see sweat beading on her forehead. It's just a coincidence. A minor glitch. Restart. The affected modules. The technicians scrambled to their keyboards like their lives depended on it. Servers went dark across the building, then powered back up with the familiar hum of rebooting systems. For about 30 seconds, everything looked normal. Transactions resumed, data flowed, the comforting green lights returned. Chelsea's smile returned too, wider and more arrogant than before. See, that's what decisive leadership looks like. Sometimes you have to make tough choices to move forward. A few scattered nods from the crowd, mostly from people who wanted to keep their jobs. Then, every screen in the place went blood red. Original key missing, the displays screamed in bold white letters. This wasn't a glitch anymore. This was the system actively rejecting every command that didn't come from me. The architecture I'd built over 15 years was defending itself the only way it knew how. I stopped walking and turned around. The whole auditorium had erupted into chaos. Phones buzzing like angry hornets, executives shouting into headsets, technicians typing frantically while sweat dripped onto their keyboards. "Sir," one of the senior engineers called out, his voice cracking with panic. "It's not responding to any of our administrative credentials." Chelsea's face had gone from confident pink to panicked white. "That's impossible. I have full access. I'm the VP of operations." She pushed through the crowd like a woman possessed, shoving aside anyone in her path. Her designer heels clicked against the polished floor as she positioned herself at the main terminal. Her hands shook as she pressed her thumb to the biometric scanner. We all held our breath. Access granted flashed green for exactly 5 seconds. Then, like a slap in the face, primary authorization required. Every file she'd managed to open slammed shut. Every transaction she'd initiated reversed itself. The system locked down tighter than a maximum security prison. Chelsea hammered at the keyboard with both hands, her MBA composure completely shattered. "This is ridiculous. I'm authorized. I have clearance." That's when Jerry Martinez let out a low chuckle that carried across the silent room. "Backup's nothing without the original key," he said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. The phrase spread through the crowd like wildfire. Engineers started smirking. A few even laughed out loud. The phrase "backup's nothing without the original" rippled through the crowd like a wave, growing louder with each repetition. People who'd spent years watching Chelsea stumble through technical meetings were finally seeing her exposed for what she really was. "Fix this!" she screamed, spinning around to face the room. "Somebody do something." But there was nothing to fix. The system was working exactly as I'd designed it. It just wasn't designed for her. That's when the financial dashboard lit up on the main screen, and the number that appeared made everyone forget about laughing. $500,000 per minute, $500,000. Every 60 seconds. Gone. The room went dead silent as people processed what they were seeing. Penalty clauses kicking in on frozen contracts. International wire transfers reversing themselves. Clients pulling out of deals when our systems couldn't authenticate their transactions. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text from Tommy Rodriguez, my old Navy buddy who now worked Pentagon contracts. "Nate, what's going on over there?" DOD is asking questions. The chaos escalated fast. Executives pulled out their phones, frantically calling clients and partners. I could hear fragments of desperate conversations echoing through the auditorium. No, it's just a temporary technical issue. The system will be back online within the hour. We can process your payment manually." But the contractors on the other end weren't buying it. When you're dealing with classified defense projects, technical failures aren't just inconvenient, they're deal breakers. Security clearances get pulled, contracts get canceled, reputations get destroyed. Chelsea was still hammering away at the keyboard, sweat now visible through her expensive blouse. Every command she entered bounced back with the same merciless message. "Primary authorization required." "There has to be an override," she muttered, talking more to herself than anyone else. "There's always an override." But I'd been in the Navy. I knew how to build systems that couldn't be overridden by people who shouldn't have access in the first place. The whole point was to prevent exactly this kind of unauthorized intrusion. 5 minutes passed. The counter hit $2.5 million in losses. 10 minutes. $5 million gone. That's when the heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor outside. People's heads turned toward the entrance like they were watching a tennis match. The energy in the room shifted from chaos to dread. Richard Bradford burst through the doors like a man whose house was on fire. And in a way, it was. Richard was 63 years old, silver-haired, and had built Apex from nothing into a defense industry powerhouse. He commanded respect in boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Washington, D.C. But right now, he looked like a man watching his life's work collapse in real time. "What the hell is happening here?" he thundered, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in the defense business. The auditorium fell silent, except for the continuous ping of error messages from the speakers. 500 people watched the most powerful man they knew struggle to understand how his empire was crumbling. All eyes shifted to Chelsea, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The daughter who'd been so confident about modernizing Daddy's company was now faced with explaining how she'd just destroyed it. "It's him," she said, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "Nathan sabotaged the system. He's doing this on purpose." I almost laughed. Sabotage. as if I'd spent 15 years building something just so I could tear it down in a moment of spite. Richard's eyes found mine across the room. For a second, I saw something I'd never seen from him before. Fear. Real, genuine terror at watching everything he'd built slip away. "Nathan," he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "What's your access code?" "I don't have an access code," I replied calmly. "The system authenticates through biometric recognition, voice patterns, and behavioral analysis. It was designed to recognize me specifically." The implication hit everyone at once. You could see it in their faces as they realized what I was saying. This wasn't about passwords or security tokens. The system was literally programmed to respond only to me. "Then unlock it," Richard said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please. Please." From Richard Bradford, the man who'd barely acknowledged my existence for 23 years, who'd passed me over for promotion after promotion while hiring less qualified people with better connections, who'd let his daughter humiliate me in front of 500 witnesses. I thought about my grandson Tommy, 16 years old and dreaming of studying engineering at MIT. Smart kid, reminds me of myself at that age. His dad, my son Michael, died in Afghanistan 5 years ago, stepped on an IED while trying to help evacuate civilians from Kabul. Tommy's college fund was sitting in my savings account, built penny by penny from my Apex salary. I thought about Sarah, my ex-wife, fighting her second round of cancer treatment, the medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover, the house payments, the life I'd built through 23 years of showing up every day and doing the work that nobody else wanted to do. I thought, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent auditorium, that I was dead weight. Dinosaur-era thinking that was holding the company back. Richard's face crumpled. Behind him, the financial counter kept climbing. $10 million, $12 million. $15 million. Name your price, he begged, his voice breaking. Whatever you want. Stock options, profit sharing, whatever it takes. But it was too late for negotiations. The damage was already spreading beyond Apex's walls. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Janet Williams at Raytheon. Word was already getting out in the defense contractor community. When a major player like Apex has a catastrophic system failure, competitors take notice. "Nathan," Richard's voice cut through my thoughts. "Please. You're destroying everything." I looked around the auditorium one more time, at the panicked executives, the worried engineers, the 500 employees whose jobs hung in the balance. These weren't bad people. Most of them were just trying to do their jobs and support their families. But then I looked at Chelsea, still frantically typing commands that would never work, and at Richard, who'd chosen nepotism over merit at every opportunity. "No, sir," I said quietly. "Your daughter already did that." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Richard's face went pale, and for the first time in decades, the man who'd built an empire looked powerless. Behind him, Chelsea had finally stopped typing and was staring at the screen in defeat, her hands trembling. That's when something beautiful happened. Something I'll never forget as long as I live. A young engineer named David Park, kid I'd mentored for the past 3 years, taught him everything about secure authentication protocols, stood up from his seat in the middle section. He looked around the room, then started clapping. Slowly, deliberately, the sound echoing off the glass walls. Another engineer joined him. Then Jerry Martinez from network security. Then Maria Santos from logistics. Soon, row by row, 500 people were on their feet giving me a standing ovation. The sound was incredible. Not polite corporate applause, but genuine, heartfelt recognition. For 23 years, I'd been the invisible guy in the background making sure everything worked. Now, finally, they were seeing me. Chelsea spun around, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. "Stop it!" she screamed over the applause. "This is my company, my father's company. He's sabotaging us." But the laughter that followed her outburst said everything. Rich, genuine laughter from people who'd watched her stumble through technical briefings she didn't understand, who'd suffered through her buzzword-filled presentations about innovation she couldn't implement. "My company!" she shouted again, but her voice cracked with desperation. The harder she screamed, the more they laughed. She'd been exposed not as a leader, but as exactly what she was, a spoiled kid playing dress-up in Daddy's boardroom. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The applause, the recognition, the respect I'd earned through decades of quiet competence. It felt good. Better than any promotion they'd never given me. Better than any bonus they'd overlooked. Then I started walking toward the exit. Each step felt lighter than the last. Behind me, I could hear Richard desperately working his phone, calling in favors, begging clients for extensions. The man who'd commanded respect from Pentagon generals was reduced to pleading for time he didn't have. "Nathan, wait!" Richard called out as I reached the doors. "We can work this out. Partnership, your own division, whatever you want." I paused with my hand on the door handle and turned back one last time. "You know what I wanted, Richard? Recognition, respect, a seat at the table I helped build. Instead, you gave those things to people who hadn't earned them." The applause had died down, but 500 people were still watching. This wasn't just my moment, it was theirs too. Years of frustration with corporate politics, with watching incompetence get promoted while competence got overlooked. "The system isn't broken," I continued. "It's working exactly as designed. The problem is you never understood what you actually owned." That's when I dropped the bombshell that nobody saw coming. "See, there's something you should probably know. Back in 2019, when you were restructuring the company and cutting budgets, I started a veteran-owned LLC to protect my intellectual property. Standard practice for anyone with half a brain in this industry." Richard's face went from pale to gray. "Every algorithm, every security protocol, every line of core code that makes your system work, I own it. Legally, completely, irrevocably. The LLC holds all the patents and copyrights." The auditorium went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. When your daughter terminated me today, those licensing agreements became null and void. Effective immediately, Apex Defense Systems no longer has legal authorization to use my intellectual property. Chelsea's knees actually buckled. She grabbed onto the podium to keep from falling. "You're bluffing," Richard whispered, but his voice had no conviction. "Check with your legal team," I said calmly. "All the paperwork was filed properly with the USPTO. Your lawyers reviewed it when I set up the LLC. They advised you it was a smart protection for the company's key assets." The beautiful irony was that Richard's own legal department had helped me protect myself from exactly this situation. They'd seen it as risk management, making sure the intellectual property was legally secure. They just never imagined it would be secure from them. I pushed through the doors and stepped into the California sunshine. The cool air felt incredible after the suffocating atmosphere inside. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. My phone was already buzzing. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing. Word travels fast in the defense industry, and everyone knew Nathan Reynolds had just become available. But more importantly, I was free. Free from the politics, the nepotism, the slow erosion of dignity that comes from working for people who don't respect what you do. 3 weeks later, Jerry Martinez called me with an update. Apex had officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The Pentagon had suspended their security clearances pending investigation. Richard had lost everything: the company, his reputation, his standing in the industry. Chelsea's LinkedIn profile now read, "Exploring new opportunities in strategic consulting," which was corporate speak for unemployed and unemployable. As for me, I'd started Reynolds Defense Solutions, LLC, veteran-owned, Pentagon-certified, and staffed with the best people I'd worked with over the years. Turns out, when you treat good people right, they'll follow you anywhere. The contract offers started rolling in within days. Seems like the defense industry had been waiting for someone who actually understood both the technical requirements and the security protocols. Someone who'd been there, done that, and had the clearances to prove it. Tommy's college fund got a major boost when I sold licensing rights to my authentication system to 3 major contractors. MIT, here he comes, and I couldn't be prouder. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's building something better and watching the people who underestimated you realize what they lost. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned, and competence always wins in the end.